in any programming language. So there are two types of errors. Two types of errors. What they are like syntax errors, similarly runtime errors. So what are syntax errors? What are syntax errors? So syntax errors are nothing but the errors which occur because of invalid syntax. Because of invalid syntax. So these errors are called as syntax errors. So while executing, any program, if something goes wrong because of end user input or programming logic or memory problems, then we will get runtime errors. Let me write this point. While executing any program, if something goes wrong because of end user input or logic or memory problems, so these are called as runtime errors. While executing any program, if something goes wrong because of end user input or logic which we have written in that particular program, similarly memory problems, if any of these, because of any of these, if we get an error, then it is nothing but runtime errors. So runtime errors are also called as exceptions. Very important. Runtime errors are also called as exceptions. Then who is responsible for this syntax errors as well as runtime errors? So coming to syntax errors, programmer is responsible for correcting syntax errors. And once all syntax errors are corrected, then program execution will be started. Once all syntax errors are cleared in sense nothing but corrected, then program execution will be started. So these are nothing but syntax errors. The errors which occur because of invalid syntax. This itself says syntax errors. Because of invalid syntax, these errors occurs. So who is responsible? Those who write the logics or program, nothing but programmer. Programmer is responsible for correcting syntax errors. Once all syntax errors are cleared, then program will be executed. It is nothing but syntax errors. Then coming to runtime errors, because of the issue in the logic or memory problems, or if there is something goes wrong because of end user input, then there is a chance of rising runtime errors. Let me show you all this with an example so that you can understand better. Let me try to create one directory, day 15. So in that, let me create one file, exception handling in Python. So if you can see here, first we discussed is syntax errors. So what is a syntax error? It occurs because of invalid syntax. Let me show you. Suppose x is equal to 10. What I want to do, if x is equal to 10, then I have to print just hello. Just I am trying to print some statement because that equal to some 10 value. So if x is equal to 10, then I need to print just hello. This is what I'm trying to do. So if x is equal to 10, then I need to print hello. So if you see here, if I use if condition or if control statement explicitly or definitely, I need to provide colon here. If I fail to provide colon, then it will raise exception or nothing but syntax error it is. Let me execute this and show you. If you see here, syntax error, it raised because of syntax, invalid syntax. So for if condition, I need to specify colon here. If I fail to do so, it will raise syntax error. What is that syntax error? It will try to specify expected colon. So I am not providing any colon here. So that is the reason why it tries syntax error. So this syntax errors occurs because of programmers. If they write invalid syntax, then it will raise syntax errors. If you specify comma here, it will execute as it is. Because x is equal to 10, so I'm checking whether x is equal to 10 or not. So it is equal to 10, so that is the reason why it is printing hello. Let us see another example. A simple example. So what you need to do? You need to just print hello. So if I use hello, if I use print statement, I need to definitely use parenthesis. If I fail to do so, it will raise a syntax error. What is the syntax error? What it is saying? Print hello at this missing parenthesis. Parenthesis means when I use print statement or print command, then definitely it has to have this parenthesis. If I fail to do so, it will raise syntax error. So these syntax errors majorly occurs because of invalid syntax. So programmers are responsible. Once syntax errors are clear, program will be executed in a peaceful way. This is about syntax errors. Then what are runtime errors? What are runtime errors? So as we discussed, runtime errors are nothing but, so the errors which arise because of end user input, or because of the logic, or because of the memory problems. So in Python, sometimes we are having some memory problems. If because of that memory problems also, if you face any issue or any error, those are nothing but runtime errors. Let me show you with another example. So this is a syntax error. Let me try to create runtime errors. Runtime error. So if you see here, it occurs because of invalid or because of end user input. Suppose you just try to take, suppose x is equal to int of input of enter the number. You just try to enter any number. So with this number, what I want to do, I need to just print that particular x here. So what I'm doing, I'm just asking the user to provide me a input. With this input, what I'm doing, I'm just trying to convert it to integer. So for converting it into integer, I should have some numerical input. So what I'm doing, I'm just making it fail to make you understand. So what I'm doing thereafter, I'm just trying to print this value. So let me execute this. If you see here, it is asking for number. I'm just using, suppose, hello. I'm just entering hello. Instead of number, I'm just entering some string value. See how it behaves. If you see here, value error. This is nothing but a runtime error. Very, very, very important. There are a lot of runtime errors which we will discuss in a while. But if you see here, it is converting our input to integer. It is not able to convert. It is a logic issue. If you see here, logic issue as well as end user input issue. So as per this, I need to provide some integer value. But I am not doing anything here. I'm just providing some string value here. So what it will do, it will raise some error. That error is nothing but runtime error. So let me execute one more time. Let me try to provide some integer value, 1, 2, 3. If you see here, it has printed. Because of end user input, it raised the error. Because of proper end user input, it printed that particular variable. Similarly, it arises because of memory problems as well as logic issues also. These are nothing but runtime errors. So for handling runtime errors, so exception handling is used. So for handling runtime errors, we use exception handling concept. Very important. For handling syntax errors, program is responsible, and once he corrects syntax, then program will be executed. But coming to runtime errors, these are to be handled in a different way by using exception handling concept in Python. Then, what is an exception? Very important. What is an exception? An unwanted or unexpected event. That it disturbs normal flow of a program. It is called as exception. An unwanted or unexpected event, it is not expected, it is not wanted. So that is the reason why it is unwanted or unexpected event that disturbs. Once a program is executing in a proper way without any disturbance, this exception disturbs the normal flow of the program. Then that is called as exception. So exception is an event. In this way also I can define. Exception is an event which will cause program termination. Either we can define in this way or we can try to define in this way. What are the examples of exceptions? Nothing but runtime errors. If you see, there are zero division error, type error, value error, right? File not found error. Similarly, end of function error, sleeping error, type punctured error. These are different types of errors. Zero division, type error, value, file not found, end of function error, sleeping, as well as type punctured error. Very important. So these are different types of exceptions which we are encountering during runtime errors, and it is highly recommended to handle these exceptions. Then what is the use of, or what is the main objective of this exception handling? If you see here, the main objective of exception handling is graceful termination of the program. So what is meant by graceful termination? We should not block our resource, nothing but our program, and we should not miss anything. So exception handling is useful for graceful termination of the program. So I will make you understand with this example. You just try to take one example. So suppose our program requires a data. That data is stored in a file which is located in London. So at runtime, if the London file is not available, then the program should not be terminated. So I need to provide alternate way how I can read the same data from another file. So that file will be provided at the time of execution locally. So if you see here, so what my requirement is, my program requires a data. That data is stored in a file. That file is located in London. It is a remote file. During runtime, I need to fetch the data from this remote file, which is located in a runtime, which is located in London. At runtime, if the London file is not available, then automatically my program will be terminated. So it will check the file is available or not. If the file is not available, my program will be terminated. So, but I don't want my program to be terminated. Instead, I can provide an alternate way. Alternate way. What is the alternate way? I can provide a local file. If the file is not present at the London location, you just pick up this local file. You use the data. So like that, exception is handled. If you can see here, I can handle exceptions by using try except blocks. If you see, first of all, it is trying. What it is trying? To fetch the data from the file which is located at London. But it will raise an error. If the file is not found, it will raise an error. File not found error. So once it is raised, what I am doing, I'm trying to provide alternate way. What is the alternate way? You just use local file. You try this. If it is not done, if it is not available, you use this. You use this local file. So it is a simple example we can understand so that exception handling is understood. Let me create another file. Module, nothing but Python file is nothing but a module. Exception handling examples. So let me take one program. So what this program does, this program just prints this particular statement. This is starting point of the program as well as this is end of the program, and in between what I am doing, I am just trying to use try and except block. If you see here, it is just printing X. So what this program does, it just prints this particular statement, and thereafter it will try to come to this try block. It is just trying. What it is saying, it is trying to print X. But if you see here, I have not defined X at any place. In this program, I have not defined X at any place. So definitely it will raise an error. So once it raises an error, I don't want my program to be terminated. So instead, my program to be executed and continued with rest of the statement. So what I can do, if there is an exception, you just go to this except block. Exception, except block. Exception, except block. If there is an exception, you need to go to this except block. So in the except block, whatever the statements are there, you just execute. That's what I am trying to say to this Python interpreter. If there is an exception, you need to go to except block. If I fail to provide so, then also it will raise an error. So I can also provide appropriate error. If there is something occurred, suppose if you say I have specified a file here. So if the file is not present, it will raise file not found error exception. What I can do, accordingly, whatever the exception it raises, I can use that exception here. It will try to check whether that exception occurred here or not, and it will try to print that. We will see that also whenever we are raising our own exceptions with a example. Don't worry. Right now, what I am doing, I'm just printing the X, but if you see here, print of X variable is not there. So definitely the exception will be erased. So for handling that exception, what I am doing, I'm just using except block. In the except block, I'm just saying that exception occurred. If the exception occurred, I'm just printing this. Let me execute this. You can see here, this is starting point of the program. Yes, it has printed this particular statement, and exception occurred. Why exception occurred? It has just trying to print X, but X is not found. So that is the reason exception occurred. It checked for except block. Except block is there. In the except block, this particular statement is there. In the except block, this particular statement is there. So it has executed that exception occurred, and thereafter it also continued with the rest of the statements. If you see here, this is end of the program. This is the statement. Rest of the statement, it has executed with this. But what happens if I fail to provide try except block? Let me make you understand with the same example without try and except blocks. What I'm trying to do, I'm just trying to remove this, providing proper syntax. If you can see here, with except block, without except block. Let me execute. Let me make you understand with comments. With except block. Similarly, without except block. Without except block. If you can see here, this except block, program having except block will be executed, but program without except block will be terminated. If you can see here, upon execution, program with except block is executed in a peaceful way, in a graceful way. There is no termination. But if you see here, program without except block raised an exception, and it has not executed this particular rest of the statements. Once the exception occurred, if you are not having exception handling, then definitely program will be terminated. Once you correct this only, then program will be executed. So that is the reason, once exception is occurred, your program will be terminated. In order to handle exceptions, you need to provide try as well as except blocks. You need to provide try as well as except blocks. Very important, very important. Similarly, this is nothing but a runtime error. You need to handle this particular runtime error by using exception handling. In that exception handling, what you will do, you will use try as well as except block. Try as well as except block. Let me take another example. So if you consider this, in general, anything is not divisible by 0. In general, anything is not divisible by 0. But what I am trying to do, I am just printing the division by 0. So what it happens, it will raise an error. So what I will do, I will try to print or execute this particular program with except block and without except block. Let me use these comments so that you can understand better. This is with except block, and let me write the same program without except block. So what I am trying to do, I am just dividing with 0. Let me remove this try except blocks. Let me correct the syntax. If you can see here, this is the program with except block and this is the program without except block. So before this, what I will do, I will make you understand without except block. If you can see here what I am doing, I'm just printing this particular statement, and thereafter I'm also printing this particular statement. And what I am trying to do, I'm just trying to divide 10 with 0. So any integer or anything cannot be divisible by 0. Very important. So, but this is a logical error. In this logic, what it will do, it will not divide. We are not able to divide anything with 0. So it is nothing but a logical error. So logical error is also a runtime error. So it will raise runtime error. That time runtime error is nothing but division by 0 is not possible. If you can see here, once executed, what it will do, 0 division error. Division by 0 is not possible. So that is the reason why it has not executed this rest of the statements. If you can see here, it has only executed the statements before the exception has occurred. These are the statements. But thereafter, once exception is occurred, it has not printed the rest of the statements. It has terminated the program. Right? If there is any exception occurred, if I want to handle it gracefully, what I can do, I can use try except blocks. So once that appropriate error, I should be knowing. So what I can do, I can take this from the user 10 as well as 0. This is integer 1 as well as this is integer 2. I can take this input from the user dynamically at the time of runtime. But if I provide statically or during dynamically, there is a chance of rising 0 division error if any of the denominator is 0. Then in that case, I need to handle. Once this exception occurs, I need to except block. Once exception occurs, it will check for except block. Once except block is also having appropriate error, then it will try to use that particular except block and it will try to execute the statements which are there in that particular except block. So we can also use multiple except blocks here. We will see in a while. If you can see here, definitely to raise 0 division error. We are handling the 0 division error with this statement and continuing with rest of the statements. So program termination is not happened here. Ungraceful or unwanted termination is not happened here. I'm just providing an alternate way to handle that exception. You can see here, upon executing, this is the statement which I wanted to be printed before this exception occurred, and thereafter exception occurred. So exception, except block. It has checked for except block. Yes, except block is there. So you are just providing what is the error. Accordingly, it will try to choose that except block, and thereafter it will try to execute the statements which are there in the except block, and thereafter the rest of the statements are also executed. Exception occurred, handle, yes, it has printed that exception block, and thereafter program is completed. It completed with rest of the statements. Very important point. So these are nothing but runtime errors. Most probably runtime errors are exceptions. Syntax errors can be corrected by programmers, but runtime errors we need to take care of. We need to provide an alternate way. So this is nothing but an exception handling. Then up to now we have seen only try and except blocks, but I need to use multiple except blocks. Along with except blocks, I also need to use else as well as finally. How you can try to use them. Let me make you understand with one example. Let me take this particular example. In this particular example, what I am trying to do, I am trying to take n1 number as well as n2 number. I am just dividing those numbers, num1 divided by num2, and thereafter I am trying to print the result. So here, if you can see, I'm just statically providing, but instead of that, also what you can do, you can try to use this particular thing. What you can do, num1, you can use like this: num1 is equal to input of enter the number 1. Or instead of this, what you can do, you can also try to take num2. So these are nothing but dynamic inputs which are taken during a runtime. So what I'm doing, I'm just trying to take these inputs at the runtime dynamically by the user. Similarly, I can also specify like this. I am just statically specifying for your understanding. So what you you need to understand, I can use multiple except blocks. If there is any exception occurred, that exception I can provide here. Accordingly, what are the blocks or statements are there in that particular except block, those are executed. So there are, as we discussed, there are different type of exceptions or runtime errors. Zero division error also occurs, type error also occurs, value error, file not found error. So these are nothing but specifically what type of error these are saying. So if anything error occurs, there is specifically that name. So that name I am just providing here. If that exception occurs, you just catch this block. If syntax error occurs, just take this block. Or in general, what you can do, even though I don't want to go for this separate type of except blocks, any exception occurs, I need to use some statement so that you can use this normal except block. Right? If any exception occurs, it will try to catch this except block and it will try to print if the statements there. But you are just specifically providing, just making for your understanding. So if there is anything goes wrong, I need to know what is the root cause. So I may be knowing during writing the program or logic, I may be knowing these are the exceptions will be occurring. So if this exception occurs, I need to throw this particular statement so that for debugging, it will be helpful to me like that. So that is the reason why I am using multiple except blocks. Before executing this particular thing, let me make you understand with 3 points. If you see here, except block is there, else as well as finally is there. What is the use of these things? So in the multiple try, except, else, finally blocks, what we are using in this particular program, try, except, else as well as finally, at which time except occurs, except block will be executed, else block will be executed, finally block will be executed. So this is nothing but except block executes only when the exception occurs. We have seen this in previous examples. If there is any exception occurred, then except block will be executed. Then what is the use of else block? When it will be executed? Else block will be executed only when the exceptions not occurred. When there is no exception, then else block will be executed. If there is any exception, except block, exception, except. You need to understand in that way. Exception, except block will be executed. No exception, else block will be executed. So finally block always executes. Finally block always executes. So this is what the difference you need to understand. Except will be executed during exceptions. When there is no exception, else block will be executed. Finally block will be always executed. Very important points to be understood. If you can see here, let me execute this particular program. What I am doing, I'm just dividing and just printing the result. So in this, definitely I'm just dividing it by 0. Definitely it will rise 0 division error. So that particular error will be shown in particular except block. It will try to check these except blocks. If there is specifically, I'm just specifying the error or not. So yes, I have specified that error. So it will try to catch this particular block and thereafter it will try to run this particular statement. Right now what I am doing, I'm just dividing with 0. It will rise 0 division error. Associatingly, it will try to print that particular statement in that particular block. Yes, thrown 0 division exception. Yes, it has thrown 0 division exception. But if you can see here, if I can raise some syntax error. So it will catch this particular block. That syntax error will be matched here. If you can see here, let me execute this. Yes, syntax error. So whatever the exception occurs, that particular except block will be executed. So this is what I am doing and explicitly specifying that error names. So I don't want to specify if anything occurs, I can use this particular except block. If you can see here, the syntax errors, once I correct these syntax errors, that particular program will be executed. So except block, if there is any exceptions, in general this will be printed. Other than 0 division error, syntax error. If 0 division error or syntax error comes, only this particular except blocks errors. Right? So if there is no particular 0 division as well as syntax, then definitely it will try to execute this particular except block. Similarly, else block will be executed when there is no exception. Finally block will be always executed. You can see here. Upon running finally block, in the finally block, it is there. So always execute statements. So it has printed the same. And similarly, there is 0 division error because of division by 0. It has thrown that 0 division exception. But I want to make that 0 to 5. So in this case, there is no exception. So if there is no exception, else block will be executed, should be executed, and thereafter finally also will be always executed. You can see here, there is no exception. So else block is executed. In the else block, if you can see here, no exceptions occurred. And similarly, in the finally block, always execute statement is there. Finally block will be always executed.